Good morning, everyone. Signed on just a couple minutes early here to let people hop into the chat, hop into the stream. We're going to start the show at 9 a.m., just like normal. We've got just about 5 minutes to go. So get in here. I'm going to go grab something, but I just wanted people to hop in, get your chat questions in, like the video, subscribe, and we will start the show promptly at 9 a.m. I've got a good show. It's going to be a good one today. I've got a special guest you may know. You may recognize him. I will be back in just a second, but hop in the stream, get ready for the show, 9 a.m. sharp. What's going on, everyone? Hopefully everyone had a good weekend despite the Hokies' loss. We're going to get the show started here in a couple minutes. Hop in, like the video, and give me any questions you got for the show. I mean, there's plenty to talk about without questions, but if you got something to say, got a comment, anything, let me know. Let's see if this is... It's weird. I can go on Twitter right now and see my face streaming. It's weird. All right, let's get this set up right. So we're ready for 9 o'clock. It was a big weekend of college football. I mean, there was a lot of games, a lot of interesting games. I don't know if it delivered as much as it could have. But it was still a great weekend. And there's only so many of these college football weekends. And so we have to cherish them. And I certainly did. I watched a lot of ball. I watched a lot of the length of time of the Hokies game certainly went on for a long time. Not the best football of the weekend, but we will get to that. A couple more minutes here, and I'm going to start the show. Coffee is always on Monday morning. Our sponsor, Compass Coffee, proud sponsor of College Football Monday. Got a couple people joining us. I'm sure there will be more shortly for that 9 o'clock start. People probably notice I always got my headphones are a little cocked every time because I like to hear my own voice when I'm talking because then I don't know how loud it is. But 8:59. All right, let's kick it off. Welcome to College Football Monday. I am your host, Pete B, and this is a live show on the Sons of Saturday channel. This is episode 3 of College Football Monday, and I am very happy if you are here hanging with me today. We're going to go over all the action that happened this weekend. It was a loaded slate of college football, and it was fun to watch some of it. VT maybe not so fun, but I did want to first recognize that it is 9/11 today, and let's just take a moment to honor those who lost their lives that day with a brief moment of silence. In this episode, I'm going to recap all the action from week 2, including the huge win by the Longhorns in Tuscaloosa. Unfortunately, the Hokies couldn't beat the Boilermakers, but I'm going to wait to talk about that game with this week's guest. In fact, I'm going to wait to talk about both of those games with this week's guest, and we're going to get to some other stuff first. After we go through this past Saturday's games, my guest and I are going to give you our conference title game picks. So the 2 teams we think from each Power 5 conference that are going to be in the championship game, and then we'll also give our projected winners. I think that should be interesting, and it was a kind of a difficult exercise and required a lot of schedule checking. If you have any questions, hop in the chat. Make sure to like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, Sons of Saturday YouTube channel. I'm going to start with the Mel Tucker news. Before we get to any games, this is a weird, messy story, but he has been suspended without pay by Michigan State. Brett McMurphy essentially reported that he's fired. It's suspended without pay, but this is all but a formality. He has coached his last game for the Spartans, according to Brett McMurphy and many other sources. The details are a mess. And USA Today had a long article on this. I recommend you check it out. But essentially, Mel Tucker engaged in a relationship with a sexual abuse prevention advocate who had come to Michigan State to speak to the team on several occasions. And they had kind of, despite him being married, had engaged in this relationship. And then he admits to that. And he admits to phone calls and I'm not going to go into all the details, but essentially, this woman was sexually harassed by Tucker. That is what's going on. And keep in mind, this is the school that's the home of Larry Nassar and that scandal. And so to have your coach basically being accused of sexual harassment of a sexual abuse prevention advocate, yeah, it doesn't really matter whether they lose or win the legal battle of how much they're going to pay him of his $80 million that's still due to him. They can't have this at Michigan State. This is the biggest no-no that he could have done. And so Mel Tucker done at Michigan State. And on the field, Michigan State hosts Washington this upcoming weekend. That could get ugly. This is a huge distraction for that team. That's a bad situation. And Washington is super good. And so that's all I'm going to say about the Mel Tucker situation. He has been suspended without pay, and Michigan State is probably going to be worse for it. Week 2, Colorado won again. Maybe not quite as impressive as the win over TCU, but they did take it to Nebraska. And although it was close for a bit there, and Jeff Sims had a long run to kind of make it interesting, it wasn't interesting when it all came down to it. The only reason it was interesting is because Shedeur Sanders was awesome. Weaver was ridiculous for Colorado. They have 4 or 5 skill players that are just amazing for Colorado. 10 receptions, 170, and a TD for Weaver. Shedeur, spectacular. I already talked about Sims' long touchdown, but that guy he cannot throw. He is a running back. When he was in the portal, and they were talking about teams that might go after him, Tech came up. And some of our fans were very interested in perhaps going after Jeff Sims before we got Kyron Drones. And I'm very glad we didn't. Not that we know anything about Kyron Drones, and that's going to be something I address later. Sims it's going to be a tough year for Nebraska. And Colorado doubles their win total from a year ago after just 2 weeks. An amazing story. They got Colorado State this weekend. That's probably another win, though it is a rivalry. Who knows what could happen, but it's probably another win. And then they'll start to get into that Pac-12 play, and we'll see what happens there. Texas A&M at Miami. That was a really fun game. Lots of points. Miami won 48-33. Van Dyke threw 5 touchdowns. And we didn't really know if Van Dyke was going to be able to get back to those first flashes that we saw. Well, we saw it in this game, a 230 passer rating in the game, a 95 QBR if you're rounding up, 4th on the week in college football, just absurd. Miami wasn't running. Neither team was running really, but it didn't matter for the Canes. They had a slim lead going into the 4th, and then they just blew it open. A&M really dominated in first downs, which made it all the more weird. Wegman threw 53 times. That's Petrino for you. Wegman's going to throw the ball around, but they couldn't capitalize. Really big win for Miami. Not that it was a conference win, but I think it thrust them into the conversation for the ACC title game. I do believe that, and that's just something I'm going to talk about later with my guest. And you know what? Before I get into some of this other stuff, I'm just going to add him to the stream because he's ready for me. What's up, buddy? We got Robbie on the podcast. You might know him from the Deep Show. It is good to see you, man. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday. Bright and early, but I'm loving it. I was up at like 5, so I've already gotten 3 hours of work done this morning. So
we don't really record in the morning ever. No. And so it's fun to see the light coming in behind the blinds. It's normally dark in there, and it's good to have you. And I'm going to go through some of the other game notes before we get to the Virginia Tech game, before we get to the Texas-Alabama game. But Ole Miss, they pulled away from Tulane in the 4th quarter, went on to win 37-20. Jackson Dart was solid. Tulane's QB really wasn't good at all. And despite out first downing Ole Miss, Tulane never looked like the better team. It looked like they were trying to catch up the whole time. The scoop and score by Mississippi made it look worse than it was because it was a competitive game, but Ole Miss was in control. And the interesting thing for Ole Miss, even though this is a big win, not a conference win, and you look at their schedule, according to the FBI, it is the toughest schedule remaining in the country. Let me just tell you what they got coming up. Georgia Tech, they should win that one. At Bama, LSU, Arkansas, at Auburn, A&M, at Georgia. So they got to go to Tuscaloosa, to Athens. So Lane, good start to the season for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, but it could get rough. For Tulane, I think they can still be the best G5 team, but SMU and Memphis, 2 other teams in their conference, are going to have something to say. I know I asked you to pick the P5 championship games. Who do you think it might be in the American right off the top here?
Oh, that's tough. So Tulane was also without their starting quarterback. So I don't know when he's getting him back. So that didn't help anything. G5. I don't know. I'm gonna have to plead ignorance on that. I got enough time to watch basically the Power 5, so I don't know if I'm necessarily ready.
Well, yeah, I was just curious if you thought future ACC member SMU could pop in there. They didn't look awesome against Oklahoma. Like they kept it close, almost covered.
Yeah,
but they didn't. And then Memphis is 2-0, but I don't know. The Americans, like it's with all the poaching that went on for the Big 12, it's not a very good conference. So I do think Tulane is still the favorite, but those 2 teams are going to be right there. And I'm curious to see who ends up in that championship game. Boise, I think the other G5 that could have some. Boise, I would have said UCF because they just played, but they're not in a G5 anymore. Nope. Mountain West always has some good teams. So it's still Tulane's race for me to get to that.
Not JMU.
JMU, listen, now they've taken down Tech 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and UVA as of yesterday by 1 point. UVA actually, and this is a good because we'll get to this now. They were starting that freshman quarterback, and that tiny kid played really well. He had 377 yards, and they almost won the game despite being dogs at home.
Yeah, that was a really fantastic game, actually, a shootout. So, and he played very well.
UVA is the only team in the ACC sitting at 0-2 after 2 weeks. They go to Maryland next. That's not good. Then NC State. And then you get the Boston College game. UVA at BC in Chestnut Hill. Now, I will say this. If this freshman continues to play well, I think that's going to be an easy UVA win. That's tough to say, but BC looks terrible. They struggled with Holy Cross. They already lost to NIU. And so this gives UVA a little bit of hope. That quarterback, I think it gives them a little bit of hope. And I don't know, were you watching the end of the game where JMU went for 2 to make it a 3-point game?
Yeah. I saw that part, which is crazy.
UVA almost did a pick 2.
Yes, it could have been. That nearly backfired.
It nearly backfired for JMU.
The rare pick 2. Those don't happen very often.
And then UVA almost threw the bomb too. That almost won it at the end as well. All right, some other notes from around the country before we get back into ACC. Texas Tech gave Oregon all they could handle. Ducks got a late cover on a defensive touchdown, much to my chagrin. Washington State defended the home turf against Wisconsin. Cam Ward played pretty well. 3 turnovers for Whiskey loomed large. Notre Dame beat NC State. Did you get any eyes on that game while you were waiting for our game to play?
No, I was mostly focused on waiting for ours, but yeah, that was dicey as well. That Notre Dame, I think you picked NC State, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not.
I think I did. Yeah, on our show, I picked NC State to cover 7.5.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I don't know what to do with Notre Dame just yet. I need some more data points.
Yeah, and Wolfpack, they had chances and they squandered a golden opportunity after a sack fumble on Hartman. They came away with no points, even though they were inside the 30 or something like that. But I will say the NC State defense looked ferocious at times. They were getting after it, and that scares me a bit for November 18th when we got to go up against NC State. Oklahoma took care of SMU. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Nothing wild. Gabriel had a nice day, 4 touchdowns, but that's kind of what he does against lesser competition. The weather played a factor in so many of the ACC games. Talked about NC State. They had a delay. Our game clearly was on a big delay. BC was on a delay. UVA was on a delay. No game's delay was longer than ours, which was like 5.5, 6 hours. UNC and App State, man, they got after it the other day. And I liked App State. I can't remember when it came down to the picks, it kept increasing all week long. It got up to 19.5 UNC favored over App State, which is just stupid in that rivalry.
Exactly. The way those two teams and the way App State plays everybody, especially Power 5 teams, they love those games.
They do. And it went to triple overtime and App State damn near won. Wake beat Vandy. I said the BC squeaked by Holy Cross. Cincy took it to Pitt and Jerkovich looked terrible. He also doesn't want you to boo him. I don't know if you saw that, but he was like, if you're a grown man in the stands booing, you got to look at your life. You're pathetic. And it's like, people have been booing for 100 years, man. Like what, like you didn't play well. What do you want?
I wouldn't use the word pathetic in a phrase, in talking about a game. And then, everybody's like, well, your performance on the other hand, what do you call that?
Right. All the other ACC teams held serve against some weaker competition. And we will get to VT Purdue shortly. Notable USC all over Stanford. I mean, that I had taken Stanford plus 29.5. That was shot to what in 30 minutes or less. It was
that first half that was already covered.
Yeah, Williams had 300 yards at the half and 3 touchdowns, just lethal. ODU beat Louisiana, and I did want to say that Grant Wilson kid looked really good, dude. He had 5 touchdowns and had like a 90 QBR in that game.
Yeah, I think that it puts our defense in a little bit of context. But the offense, not so much. But we'll get to that.
And then if you look at the top QBRs in the country through 2 weeks, second best QBR in the country, DJU at Oregon State. And with how Clemson looked in that first half against Charleston Southern and Cade Klubnik throwing up a under sub 50 QBR, I think that speaks volumes about the Clemson offense and what that system's all about.
A little bit of seller's remorse there.
Yeah,
that is, that's tough. Clemson looks terrible. just god awful. And
they did for the first half. You know what's crazy? Yeah. They had a 50-point spread, 50.5-point spread. They missed it by a point and a half or something. Like they almost covered the spread.
Yes.
Even though the first half was a nightmare.
That was out of necessity because people were there was a real fear that coming out of that game, people were really, really going to be worried about what the heck was going on in Clemson. So they had to do something in the second half. But the first half, they looked terrible. They looked terrible in their first game.
My last note before we get to Texas and Alabama was Cal really hung with Auburn. I know we don't normally go to the West Coast too much. I mean, me and Robbie talk ball, but they are a future ACC member. Yeah. I kind of, I've been hinting at the fact that when Cal, Stanford, and SMU come into the ACC, well, it's not going to be so bad for VT on the field because those teams aren't great. And that typically is true. But Cal is number 33 in the FPI right now. Yeah. And they made a few mistakes. They could have beat Auburn. They really could have beat Auburn on their home turf, on Cal's home turf. They were at home. Spavital as the OC for Cal has made a difference, like big time. I think he was the one that I think Texas State had as their head coach, and then he couldn't cut it. But he was a really good OC before that. Mm-hmm. With was it Holgo and him at WVU?
He was at WVU.
All right, so we're going to talk about the showdown in Tuscaloosa. But I just want to tell you about Compass Coffee real quick. With 16 locations in DC and Northern VA, Compass is quickly becoming the go-to cup of joe in our nation's capital. Robbie, I'm sure you pop into a Compass Coffee every now and again.
I do.
Two Marines started Compass because they wanted to make a cup of coffee that points you in the right direction every day, kind of like a compass. Right now, they're offering our listeners 20% off their first order using code 2DEEPVT. That's 2DEEPVT, all caps, all one word. So go to their site, download the Compass app, and load up your cart. Because even if you don't live in the DC area, they will ship coffee right to your door, and you're going to get 20% off. So load it up. Compass Coffee, great coffee, doesn't have to be complicated. Texas and Alabama. This was the big one of the weekend. A lot of focus, a lot of playoff hopes on this game. Texas 34, Alabama 24. And even though Bama took a lead at the end of the third, lasted about 1 minute. Yeah. I thought Texas just looked like the better team the whole way through.
So I have two thoughts here. One, yes, Texas looked like the better team. It's overblown that Texas blew out Alabama. I do not think that was the case. In watching this game and then rewatching this game, because I went back and did the 16-minute rewatch, which is awesome, where they just condense it down to like all the meaningful plays. There were about 3 times in this game where Alabama nearly got its footing, stabilized, and it looked like they could have taken over the game. At least 3 times. This was not a blowout by any stretch. At the end, it got there were some mistakes. The quarterback had 2 turnovers, but Texas absolutely looked like the better team, but it was not a blowout. So I agree with your point, but I just wanted to, there was a lot of that commentary floating out there that I don't necessarily agree with.
No, that's a really good take. And Bama couldn't get in the backfield, and that was a big problem for them. Just 2 tackles for loss. Quinn Ewers played really well. Is it Ewers or is it Ewers? Like I can never quite get it.
Quinn Ewers.
He played really well. 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, 89.4 QBR for him. 4 or 5 passes that went over 30 yards, something that he didn't really do in his short spurt last year. Jatavion Sanders, huge game, 5 for 114. Adonai Mitchell had 2 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy had some drops, but played well and is a really good player. And I was worried that in this matchup, a star player like Bijan Robinson would be missed. They didn't really miss him.
No, not at all. Texas offense is so exciting to watch. It is exciting. Running the ball, they are good for 8 to 10 yards on really hard runs, on really nice zone read type stuff. The running game looks good. The passing game is electric. Quinn Ewers has a arm, and he knows where to put the ball, and they have the wide receivers and the tight ends to do it. With Sanders and getting him open in space on a few of those passes, it was electric. So their offense is really, really deep, and their defense equally, they were in the backfield. They got some key sacks at really critical times. And I think the turnovers were decent coverage on the back end. The DBs did a good job kind of disguising it, but Jason Milroe is going to be a stud quarterback for Alabama. I know he had a tough night, but he has the arm talent. I think he has the legs and the ability to run the ball. He's young. He made some mistakes, and I think it was tough. But Texas has, they're legit from my perspective.
I want to ask you about Milroe in a second, because he went for 300, 140 passer rating, but just 52% completion, 2 INTs. I'll get to that in a second. It was a huge win for Texas. And you're right. Their defense, 9 TFL, 5 sacks, really bothered Milroe. This is a big win for Texas. First one in a long time, maybe the biggest win in 20 years. Like, it's up there. It's really up there to win in Tuscaloosa. Are you a believer in Sark now? Because I know we both had our questions going into the game, going into the year. And at this point, with this win, do you think they're a shoo-in for the playoff? Shoo-in is strong, but
that's
their chances.
They would really have to screw something up for them not to make it in. And I know, especially in the conference that they're playing in, I know that there are a lot of teams, and we're going to get to that as well in the Big 12 and what's going on there. But none of them are at the caliber of what Texas just showed on the field, in my opinion. So I would say they are as close to a shoo-in as anybody in the country, probably at this point.
Who's going to get Georgia. A better win, right?
Yeah.
No, like winning at Tuscaloosa. I mean, and Bama, they could lose 3 games, but even if they do lose 3 games, it's a monster win. Like, that is going to look really good on the resume, because you're right. The Big 12, it doesn't have a ton of strong, like, high caliber wins. Yeah, you're going to play Oklahoma on a neutral site, and that's going to be vitally important. But I have a hard time seeing Texas losing 2 games.
Correct. So they are as close to a shoo-in as you can come up with. Maybe Florida State has an easier path, but that's probably between Florida State or Texas who has the clearest path. And I know Georgia, but Georgia still has some teams that
and they got to play the title game
players. Exactly. And they got the title game. That's right.
And the title game for Florida State, and let's get there in a minute, but they're on their regular season schedule, Miami starts to look a little bit more troubling. So that's interesting. All right. Milroe. The question coming into the season was who was going to replace Bryce Young. And I think, considering the circumstances, considering the opponent, I thought he played well enough. He's really good running the football, and his passing is all right. Is Bama good enough at the quarterback position to run the table? Because they essentially have to run the table to get in to the playoff.
No, they can't, because they're going to end up having to play Georgia. So no, they cannot beat Georgia with what was on the field, because Texas defense was good. Georgia's is better. So if he had a tough time and found himself on his butt a bunch in this game, he's going to find himself in deep trouble even more against Georgia. So no, I am close enough to saying that Alabama's playoff hopes are relatively dashed after this game.
And I think I'm with you. And maybe in the regular season, Bama can run the table, because the SEC West, there's 2 other teams that have already caught a loss. And so it's not looking as tough as it normally does. So maybe they run through the regular season, but then Milroe against UGA, he can grow, he can improve, but that's going to be a tall ask. And that doesn't even say anything to the improbability of Georgia going 3 straight seasons undefeated, which would be ridiculous, but we'll get there. AP poll. Let me pull this up for you. All right, these are some of the things that from the weekend. Week 2 is in the books. We got the AP poll. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4. Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Texas is at number 4, with USC right behind at number 5. 4 ACC teams ranked: FSU, UNC at number 20, Duke at number 21, and Miami at number 22. Right there in a row are 3 ACC teams. Look at the Pac-12, man. On that right side of the graphic there, if people are watching, 8 teams in the Pac-12 are ranked. 8 out of 12.
Yeah. As it's getting disbanded, which is
right.
Absolutely hilarious.
Their best season like ever. And they're going to be non-existent next year.
So yes, Pac-12 is lights out right now. USC is lights out. Washington's offense is incredible. Utah and Oregon just struggled this week. So both those teams struggled. Colorado, those guys, the Buffs are hilarious and electric and awesome. So yeah, there are a lot of really good teams on here. There's a lot of teams on here that would get the absolute shit kicked out of them if they had to play Georgia, Florida State, Michigan, Penn State. I could roll through this. Alabama, Texas. If they had to play any of those teams, they would get waxed.
You just gave me a weird idea. Yeah. What would a Georgia Colorado game look like? Like first of all, the attention, oh my God, I can't even imagine. But would they just seek and destroy like Shedeur Sanders and some of those skinny wideouts, or would Colorado throw a few punches?
I think it would maybe a few punches early, and then I think it would probably get out of hand pretty quickly. The size and the just athleticism of Georgia players, if you line them up against what Colorado has, is going to be pretty frightening, I think. And I think that's going to shut it down pretty quickly. I think it would be fun for about a half, but then I think it would probably, kind of dwindle.
It is wild that we're heading into week 3 and Saban, Dabo, and Brian Kelly all have a loss already. This is one of those years where some really good programs have flaws, noticeable flaws, because the quarterback, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, they're not there anymore. Like some of these really powerhouse blue bloods don't have the strength at the quarterback position, and it just makes such a big difference.
All right.
Let's do VT corner. All right, let's go to the Purdue game. Purdue 24, Hokies 17. Weather delay after Purdue went up 7-0. It was just long enough for Allie Jennings to get rolled up on and looked like he was in a lot of pain. And I don't think the rumors sound very good on that. And I'm worried about him coming back for us. I would say our guys did not look ready to play when the game started or when it restarted. Was that your take on that?
Yeah, the beginning of the game looked bad. And then when we came out, it looked as though Purdue, they took a TV timeout, and that was it for Purdue. And it looked like Virginia Tech had been sitting in the locker room for 6 hours, is exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
So it was a night and day difference. It settled in, and then both teams looked more prepared. And then ultimately Purdue finished.
Right. And they did get out to that lead. I don't know how after that start, and then you basically get like a free halftime. Like you get a free, okay, that didn't go well. Let's reset. And then we came out and we did the exact same thing. Go down 17-0. But to their credit, to the Hokies' credit, they fought back as Pride teams have been known to do. They fought back. They managed to tie it 17-all. At the half, and that was on the backs of our star players who were left. It was Bashal Tootin and it was Jalen Lane, and that was it, basically, in the first half. I mean, those guys are so good, and then Lane pulls up with a hammy, and we lost him for part of the game. The second half was ugly, though, right? I mean, defensive standoff. We were able to finally slow their offense down, which is good. They had Hudson Card. They have Graham Harrell, and we held them scoreless for 30, 35 minutes, but the offense couldn't do anything, and the defense finally gave way. And Purdue scored halfway through the fourth quarter. Maccabee was just tearing us up. That guy was impossible to tackle.
Yeah, the walk-on. They spent half the time talking about him fixing
they sure
cars.
Did.
Yeah. So he tore us up. The way that I think about this game is you watch some games and the better team goes down early, and because the momentum came up in this game. That's all they would talk about is, oh, you can't give Virginia Tech momentum. That's not what was actually happening when we went down 17-0, and then we got it back to 17. That was not the better team starting to reestablish dominance in the game. That was us playing kind of lights out for a small window of time to get it back to 17-17, and then things were level set and the momentum had not shifted. That's not what was actually happening. It almost looked like when a team has a really good last gasp and they make a comeback at the end of a game and they put 100% into it. We put 100% into it, but too early. It's Fast and the Furious. We hit the nos too early in the game, and that was it. We were out, and then Purdue kind of just took it from there.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It was a wonderful 8 to 10 minute stretch there. Yeah. we were flying, and if you guys are familiar with Arrested Development, a little too close to the sun. That's what happened there, and we couldn't maintain it. And then the offense started to look real bad. The stories I had were just our run game, not good. Our tackling, not good. Injuries, and then, of course, Grant Wells' performance. Which one of those do you want to talk about? Run game, tackling? I mean, what's wrong with the run game, man? 11 yards in the run game?
We are making it. I can't figure. We make offense look so absolutely difficult. We make it look like we are running up like a mountain to have competent offense. Yeah. It looks so hard. And you watch. I'm not even talking about the elite teams. Of course, the elite teams make it look easy, but even look at Purdue when they needed to put together some offense at the end of that game. They did. And they did it in a very competent, methodical way that didn't look all that difficult. And it just looks so challenging. So what's wrong? The blocking is bad. We're running it up the middle against three gigantic 320-pound defensive linemen that are the absolute studs. And they went the double eagle, defensive line against us, and we couldn't do anything about it. We didn't run it on the outside. When I wanted to see some sort of sweep and just action on the outside, we couldn't put that on the field to generate some speed. Then we lost. It was just, there was no threat of Allie Jennings then there was no threat of Lane, and then the running game got even worse. It is anemic.
And you're right about the running up the middle, and that's been a big point even in the ODU game about how much we're going up the middle. And some of that is by design. Some of it is because Grant is handing it off when maybe he should keep it and take it to the outside. There are some RPO decisions that maybe were a little bit on the poor side. Not to mention the fact that Purdue was getting pressure, a ton of pressure with 3 down linemen, but Kydron Jenkins coming off the side, that guy was a menace. 9 tackles for loss and 3 sacks for Purdue. But I know there's some good players there. Come on. Yeah. I understand. But this is not the Purple People Eaters. This is not the Steel Curtain. This is not, 2010 Clemson or whatever, or 20 Dexter Lawrence. All those Dexter guys, 2017, whatever it was. This is Purdue, okay? The run game shouldn't have 11 yards against Purdue. It just should not. And it was a rainy game. So all the more reason you got to run the football. And we were looking dead in the water, pun intended. Our defense, let's go to the defense and the tackling a little bit here. They seem to over pursue maybe a little bit again at the line of scrimmage. Was that something you were noticing?
Yeah, I think, and that showed up a little bit in the ODU game. We talked about that, where we're over pursuing a little bit on the edge, we lost the inside. Mm-hmm. And so we were getting stretched outside and giving up the inside. And their offensive line was just, they were kind of pushing around and bullying around our inside. And then Maccabee was just coming in with a thundering force and just getting yards there. So there was over pursuit. There was times of really great defensive back coverage. And then other times that I wanted to pull my hair out, that it was just people lost their guys. They were in the wrong position. It was rough on the defensive side as well.
When and I was going to go back to their run game and our tackling, because we just had a really hard time. I don't know what was going on with the tackling. It was hard to watch. When, like, this is kind of bad in our current climate, but when someone's trying to restrain someone and it's kind of a crazy person and they're flailing and their arms are going everywhere and you can't get control of them, that's what Maccabee was running the football. Like, he's not physically superimposing, but when he hits you, it's just like he's moving in every different direction and you can't bring him down. And we had a really hard time with that. And that stunk. And something about that, we were getting in their backfield. Like, we were in their backfield. I think we had 8 tackles for loss. We're back there. But every time it happened, they seemed to be 3 yards down the field. Like,
or going the other direction.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We have to address QB1 here.
Yes.
Grant really struggled in the second half, just like he normally does. He threw some really nice passes. And when Jalen Lane was on the field in particular, we were able to move the football. But he got hit in the legs, and it looked like that affected his ankle. We were able to score after that, but in the second half, it probably tightened up on him. I don't really know, but like, he was sailing every single ball. Like, it didn't even look like he could hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah, it was the accuracy issues showed up. He was definitely injured, obviously, given what we saw in the last series in the game, and it showed up. It exacerbated the accuracy issues that he already has.
Yes.
So I do not think that it is fair to the fan base to just pin that on Grant Wells was injured and that's why he couldn't make good passes. It exacerbated a problem that is already existing in the pass game with him. So that was not even close. A lot of those passes
was very well said by you. That is exactly the right way to put it, because we know what Grant is kind of at this point, and the best of the best is, the last 3 quarters against ODU last week. Mm-hmm. And then the worst is ODU last year. And this was somewhere in between, and then you add in the injury, and it emphasizes his flaws. And him being banged up, I just felt like they needed to make the switch to drones about 2 series earlier. They needed to, and I know Grant's probably telling him, I'm good, I'm ready to go back in. That's what players do. But it was pretty apparent watching the game, like, we really needed to move to drones because he gave us a little something.
That is a coach's responsibility to ignore the quarterback when he's saying, I'm good. That is what you get paid to do, is to make the hard decisions, to pull a guy, to keep a guy in. And they got paid in this game to make the wrong decision. And they should have made the move earlier if they wanted a chance at really winning this game, and they didn't.
Yeah. I think going forward, it's only 2 games into the season, and I really don't like to be reactionary, but we saw an entire season of Grant Wells start last year. We saw Grant Wells start behind a bad offensive line and no receivers. We saw that last year.
Yeah.
Now we're back to that, right? Our receivers, we don't know if we're getting Lane back. We don't know if we're getting Jennings back for Rutgers. So we know what Grant looks like in that situation. I think for the good of the team, for a chance to win this next game, I think the better play is to start drones. If nothing else, to give the locker room a spark and some hope. I think on the field, you can design something around a guy with that physicality and that skill set that will present problems for Rutgers, because they got a good D-line. And we'll go more into Rutgers on our 2 Deep show later in the week. But I was curious, do you think it's time to maybe make a change at QB1 for starting?
So the easy reaction to what we're talking about here is fans always want the backup quarterback. And I think that has a lot of truth to it, but it makes it also impossible to have a real discussion about the facts of the quarterback situation. So let's take it a different way. Grant Wells given the challenges in the run game, I know he's a quarterback, but given the challenges in the run game and the emphasis that was put on establishing the run, he cannot even improve as a quarterback until the run game improves as well, because the pass rush is just going to be overwhelming if we don't have the run game. And Kyron Drones adds a versatility that will open up the run game as well, and his legs and his athleticism that will allow him a better chance to be a good quarterback for us. So I think while it may not be fair, I don't really care about it's football. Things aren't fair. I think the struggles in the run game, the accuracy issues that we're kind of seeing present themselves again, if we want a chance to go to a bowl game, I don't think we will make a bowl game with Grant Wells. I think there's a shot at making a bowl game based on what I've seen thus far. Granted, it is extremely limited, just knowing what Kyron Drones brings in his versatility, his run game, and keeping their defense honest about the ability for him to break off for a long run.
Yeah. And the struggles on the offensive line and the struggles in the run game lead us to this conclusion, because you got to figure out a way to take lemons and make lemonade. Like, that's what you got to do with the state of the offensive line right now. And I don't know if it's talent. I don't know if it's some of the scheme. We talked about the narrow holes even before people fail at their blocks. It's just, there's never seems to be an inch of space before we even get to the line. Yeah. And so we got to change up something. And the biggest change you can make is at the QB position. And I do think I put out the video comparing Drones to Hooker. That would be the ultimate hope, right? Is that he could be anywhere close to what Hendon was able to give us. Is he closer to QP? Is he closer to Hendon? We won't know until we see him on the field. We just won't. Some good things in this game before we move on to our conference championship game picks. Yep. I thought Wright stepped up at the tight end position. He had that nice big long play down the middle, wide open. The Gosnell brothers, Steven and Benji, I both thought they looked really good. There's some hope going forward because of those receivers. Even if we lose some of the top guys for some time here, I think there's still enough there. Felton, Holloway, Lofton, the Gosnells, there's enough there to still win games. That's still better talent, I think, at the receiving position. And now these guys are a year older, some of them, that it's better than last year at the receiver still, even if Jennings and Lane are out.
I agree. I still think the wide receiving talent is better even with those two out. And I think if Lane is able to come back, because I think his injury is in my having seen it and just based on rumor mill and stuff, it seems like that is more a more minor injury. If he is back, then I think it is a lot better than what it is last year. So now it's just ways to get him the football. And I do think we need to find ways to use Felton and his speed better. I know we had the long ball down the left side of the field. The pass, wasn't.
Coverage was good.
Coverage was really good, but I think it showed potential on using him as a downfield threat. I think the Gosnell brothers, they played really well and they stepped up when we really didn't have any other option. So I do think there's talent there, and that's not even some of our best plays were Tootin catching the ball on the outside.
You're right.
Those were so that's a real threat right there. So I do think that there's a lot more opportunity here in the pass game if we can get people the ball.
Yeah, I'm with you. Ultimately, it was a disappointing loss, a long day for the fans, and I feel bad for people who had come down and then commitments and had to leave. But for the people who stuck around, kudos to you. Thank you for coming back, making it loud in there, because it was loud in there, especially towards the student section. Students came back, so good for them. And Pat and Billy said they had a blast for what it's worth. I talked to them after the game and they said it was a long day, but they had a really fun day. And it was kind of like, will they, won't they play kind of thing. It was kind of exciting, almost like a snow day for school. And then they got football. And so a lot of the fans were still happy to go back to the game. And our buddy Joe, he was there and he went back to Lane.
And and if you listened to Too Deep last week, you got a very good preview for this game, because I think we just about perfectly nailed what the outcome of this game was going to be in terms of how much scoring there was going to be, in terms of it coming down to the final plays of the game, pretty much to a T. I think we nailed it, and it played out almost exactly how we anticipated to. Granted, I was hoping for that close game to be a better outcome.
Yeah, I think we even said like 24-27. Like we needed 27 to 30 points to win the game, and that proved to be true, and we couldn't get there, unfortunately. All right, conference championship games. This is kind of a fun little exercise, and we'll start with the ACC. I asked Robbie to come up with his 2 championship game participants for each Power 5 conference and the winner of that conference. So for the ACC, I will go first. Florida State. I think that's an easy pick for most teams. Their schedule's favorable. And then I'm going to go UNC.
Okay.
And the reason being, I don't like it, especially after the triple overtime game against App State, and the fact that it was one game of defense that we've seen from them in about a season. It was against a decent team, but we don't know how good that offensive line is for South Carolina. But they get Miami at home.
Yep.
And so I gave the edge to UNC, but for me, you got to look out for Miami. You got to look out for Clemson.
Yes.
But they already have a conference loss, and you got to look out for Duke. I mean, Duke is a contender. So who's your team?
Well coached with Elko.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were going to go UNC or obviously Florida State is the shoe-in, a relative shoe-in, as you can call it right now. I didn't know if you were going to go Miami or UNC. I'm going to lean towards Miami. And I think that was a big statement. Who knows what Texas A&M is and isn't, but that's a pretty statement win in that game. So I'm going to lean towards Miami. I still think UNC has obviously the better quarterback in that matchup, but I'm going to go towards Miami's athleticism.
Yeah, I went with Drake May, but TVD, even though he doesn't see the field great all the time, and Spencer called him the F it we ball quarterback. Sometimes that works, man. And if you've got Restrepo out there, it can really work. And so I flipped a coin because it really could be I just gave the edge because UNC gets them at home. SEC. Oh, champion. My champion's FSU.
Yep. Me as well.
Oh, okay. SEC. Georgia. I think they're going to walk through the regular season. They play Tennessee November 18th. That's the only game I think they might lose. Otherwise, I think they're going 12-0 into the championship game.
Yep.
And then despite the loss, I'm going Bama to make it.
Wow. I like that. Bama to make it. So is SEC still in straight up divisions?
They are. So there's 2 that are doing divisions, Big Ten and SEC.
Oh gosh, that always makes things fun. I do like Alabama to go back because this is going to really, I have to go Alabama for the same reason that I had Alabama picked for this game, which did not work out against Texas, which is I'm only picking that because of the Saban factor. Mm-hmm. I'm also picking it because 10 games is a lot of games for a quarterback to continue to develop. And I think that experience from that Texas is worth 5 games of experience for a young quarterback. So I will also see you with Alabama in there, but it's going to be Georgia as my pick for the winner
of the conference. I'm going to go Georgia to win the conference as well. But as me and Sam talked about on the first episode of College Football Monday, going 13-0, undefeated for a third straight year, that seems so unlikely. Like it doesn't happen in college football. And that's the only thing that scares me about this. Now, I would almost feel better about my championship game pick if they lose to Tennessee.
If they take a loss earlier, then you're like, oh, now they just have to go 12-1. I can handle that.
But the reason I'm picking Bama is because they have the easiest remaining schedule in the SEC West. They have to go to A&M, Kentucky, and Auburn, but they get LSU at home. And so I'm gonna go with Bama for that reason, and I'll pick Georgia to win. Big Ten. I still like Michigan. Ohio State looked better. Marvin Harrison looked like Marvin Harrison, but I still think Michigan wins that game. The Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. That's what's going to make that side of the conference. Who wins those games? They might all go 1-1, but I think just the physicality of Michigan, The quarterback looks good. Going with them. My pick go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Iowa. It is my pick from the Big Ten West. And that was a really hard, that division, it's a weird division. Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, they could all be in that game.
Yeah, I'm going to go Penn State. I like what I'm seeing. Michigan they've missed Harbaugh for 2 games and they still haven't missed a beat. I don't know what that actually means, other than maybe they played relatively easier teams and walked right through them. But Penn State's running backs are legit. Their passing game is pretty. I think that it's going to be between them. I think Ohio State's on the outside looking in, and unless that quarterback, it started to improve a little bit this week, but not enough, in my opinion, for those other 2 teams. So I'm going to go Penn State. And I like the Iowa pick. Anytime that, first of all, I don't know who else I would pick on that side right now or have confidence in. So
I know.
Whenever that's the case, then I'm going to go with a relatively good defense.
Because Illinois, they didn't look great. Purdue, we saw them already lose a game and then beat what we don't know is a very good Virginia Tech team in a struggle. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin just lost on the West Coast to Washington State. So I'm going to go with Iowa because they miss Michigan and Ohio State. They do have to go to Penn State, but they miss, the 2 big boys. And
they're fine even with that loss to Penn State. So that won't matter.
Yeah. So Iowa. And then my champ is Michigan. Who's your champ for the Big Ten?
Oh, it's going to be, Penn State.
You're going to take Penn State? Okay.
Yeah.
I just think Penn State has a Michigan problem historically. Can they get over that? That's a big question for them. Oh, and we do have a comment from Billy Ray here. Going back to the SEC. Is this the year Lane gets Bama?
Oh.
And this is what we were talking about earlier with Ole Miss. Number 1 hardest schedule left in the country. Number 1 of all 133 teams. They got to go to Bama. They got to go to Georgia. And so Bama's earlier, I think. And so the health could be on their side. And they are a good team. So if Bama takes 3 losses, one of them could be from Lane Kiffin.
I think it could be. And they look. Yes,
I don't know why he likes Ole Miss so much.
He just loves Lane. Absolutely. Yeah. And
but he was a freeze guy too.
Yes. So it could be that, though. That will be the double Saban effect. You'll have like 2x the Saban effect, which is 1, he's trying to resuscitate the season and give all of his players a big push to win, and he won't want to take an L against Lane Kiffin.
No, that'll be a fun game.
He's going to have his guys juiced up. He's going to be doing shots of, in their legs.
Here we go. This is the reason. Pops played at Ole Miss in the 70s. Okay, that makes sense. All right. 2 more conferences. We'll run through these quick. Pac-12, USC. It's a brutal schedule, but one of those brutal schedule games is Notre Dame, which isn't a conference game. So I'm going to take USC to make the Pac-12 championship game. My other pick, there's Utah out there. There's Washington. There's Oregon. I'm going with Oregon State. Wow. Oregon State against USC. Oregon State has also had some big upsets against USC over the years, but Oregon State gets Utah at home. They get Washington at home. And their only really tough road game is Oregon, and that is the rivalry. Yeah. And so, like, anything can happen in that one, and no USC on Oregon State's regular season schedule.
Wow. Oregon State. I love it. I'm here for it. But I'm going to go chalk and go Washington. That and Penix is just, he is a monster. That offense is so dynamic. And arguably maybe USC gives them a run for it, but it's the best offense probably in the country. And I think that carries a lot of weight in those games. Utah just struggled. Oregon just struggled. So it's probably between Washington and Oregon State.
Yeah, Washington is really good, and they could easily be them. I kind of wanted to go a little bit off the beaten path, go to Oregon State. My champion is a
lot of chalk here, so yeah. I think that's perfect.
I mean, it's hard to project this, but champ is USC, but I just think they could lose to Notre Dame. They could drop one to Washington or Oregon. Like, it's such a hard schedule. 8 ranked teams. We talked about there being 8 ranked teams. They got UCLA. Like, it's a tough schedule. There's 6.5, I think, legit candidates for the Pac-12 title game. And the half is Colorado.
Wow.
So like, cause it's USC, Oregon, Washington, Utah, UCLA, Oregon State. And then I put a half on Colorado. So it's a lot of teams that could potentially
I'd put a half
do
on
it.
UCLA as well. But
yeah, that's probably right. That's probably right. All right. Big 12 going Texas.
I mean, I think that's,
they got a big win. They beat Alabama. They got to be my pick to go to the championship game for the Big 12. Road games at Baylor, TCU, Houston, Iowa State. That's not scaring anybody. They don't really have a really tough road game. They have the neutral site game with OU. And that is my other pick for the championship game. You want to talk about chalk? I'm picking Texas and OU in their last year of the Big 12, but OU looks good. Kansas State, the other team I think is competitive. They have to go to Texas. They have a road game at OK State. They have to go to Kansas for Kansas State. So I'm going to pick OU. Who do you got for the championship game in the Big 12?
Texas. Obviously, I think that is where I have to go. And I'm going to go Kansas State. So you went off the beaten path. I'm going to go off the beaten path. I think
Oklahoma they did win the conference last year.
That's right. Oklahoma looked good in week 1. Week 2, I think it was a little bit more suspect. And I think there's more development that has to happen with that coaching staff over time. I still think there's a bit of little brother syndrome, given everything and all the attrition that happened with everybody going over to USC and the coaching losses. That's going to rear its head at some point. And so I'm going Kansas State, and I think Texas takes that game.
Okay. Yeah. I'm taking Texas as my champ as well. The what you were just saying about, lost it. Can't remember. All right. Go ahead.
And I think I got the right pick. Sorry, okay. I'm starting to second guess myself.
Texas for the championship. Okay.
Yeah.
It was about OU, and we mentioned how much they slaughtered Arkansas State and how that was like a little bit of a statement. Well, I kind of, after hearing things this week, like Arkansas State's not in good shape. Like they might be one of the worst teams in FBS. So maybe that OU win wasn't as impressive as I thought. I'm going to offer up my playoff 4, and I encourage you to do so as well if you want. This is my new playoff 4. It has changed. I have moved Alabama out of the 4 spot, put Texas in, and I moved Georgia to my 1 because at this point, I don't love it. But even if they catch a loss versus Tennessee, I think they could still have the 1 loss, be the number 1 seed. Michigan moves to my number 2 seed, Florida State number 3, and Texas number 4 as it stands now. This is my new playoff 4. I added Texas in, and this was actually Sam Jesse's playoff 4. Maybe not exactly in this order. I think he had Michigan 1, but like he had Texas in to start the year. So kudos to Sam. He had a good prediction. At least it matches my week 3 prediction. How about you?
Can I poke a hole? I'm fine with the teams, and I'm even fine with Michigan being in there. My issue is that with your 4 is that both Texas and Florida State have a better chance of coming away with a clean record, perfectly clean record than Michigan does. Michigan has Ohio State and they have Penn State, and I think they could still get in even potentially with a loss there, but I think that there's a higher likelihood that either FSU or Texas takes that 2 spot.
That's a very good point, and I don't doubt that you're right. This is almost as if I kind of almost treated this more of like a power ranking than a playoff 4. And the exercise is difficult, as you know, just like who's going to catch a loss, who doesn't. And I think you're right in that Texas and Florida State have a better chance of going clean slate. But I also think that if Michigan has 1 loss, the committee is going to give them, and it's like a 3-point loss to Penn State, and then they beat Ohio State, and then they win the title, they're going to give them a lot of credit. And Georgia, same thing. Even if they catch a loss and they beat Alabama, they might still put them at 1, even if Florida State's undefeated.
The funny scenario is that if Michigan and Georgia both run the table, Michigan, in my opinion, may have a better strength of schedule than Georgia this year, but Georgia will still get the number 1 nod by the committee because of 2 years. This is the 3rd year, and it's the SEC. But I think Michigan would actually have a better resume at that point.
Forget what Georgia's done the last 2 seasons. I think you kind of have to, and I talk about statistical and probability, but just looking at this year, the team, based on the schedule, who's in front of them, the potential championship game matchup. The team most likely to go undefeated, in my opinion, is Georgia. I think their regular season schedule is so weak compared to these other three, with at least two of these teams and a lot of other teams around the country. And so I think Georgia has the best chance of going undefeated. That's why they are my number one. Michigan can catch a loss, and their schedule's difficult enough that I think they can be number two. The thing we haven't talked about, and I haven't gotten your playoff 4 yet, do you think a Pac-12 team gets in there? Because that is an extremely tough conference, but that's why I kept them out.
Right. No, I don't think they're going to get in there. I think that is they're going to beat up on each other. So I think that's probably what's going to end up happening there. And I think there's less of a chance for that to happen. You're really talking about them taking either Texas or Florida State spot.
Oh, and you can see my graphic is incorrect here because I got the date wrong. But whatever. When I edited the graphic and moved Texas in, I didn't change it to 9/11. But you get the idea. This is the week 3 show, and you understand that this is Pete's playoff 4 as of 9/11. Did you ever give me a definitive playoff 4, Robbie?
I'm sticking with the same teams. I think
okay, same 4. Okay,
yeah. If anybody. I can't. I really like Penn State, but I'm not ready to swap them in for Michigan just yet. So I'm going to stick with. I think you had the right 4 here.
Okay. Week 3 games. There are some of interest, but it is compared to last week. It's not a great slate. Tennessee at Florida. It's a rivalry and a big SEC game, but in theory, Tennessee should make quick work of them. South Carolina at Georgia. Another like kind of exciting matchup from a Shane Beamer and Kirby Smart and some teams with some hype, but like Georgia's 26.5 point favorites. I mean, this is the best we got here. Washington at Michigan State, who just lost Mel Tucker. Washington heavy favorites going into East Lansing, and I think they will win the game. And I think that it's a huge distraction for Michigan State to try to overcome. Texas hosts Wyoming, which I just thought was interesting because Wyoming beat Texas Tech. And Texas is coming off one of the biggest wins they've had in forever. And so is that a soft spot?
It could be. Maybe for the first half.
What do you think? What's your guess on the spread?
Coming off of that win, probably 20.
It's 28.5. Texas is favored. And then it'll probably come down, I would think, a little bit. 28.5 is a lot. LSU at Mississippi State, Penn State at Illinois, BYU at Arkansas. Kind of some fun power teams going up against each other. TCU at Houston, San Diego State at Oregon State. San Diego State's always feisty.
Yeah.
And in the ACC, Pitt, West Virginia, backyard brawl is back. West Virginia, 1.5 point underdogs in that one. Minnesota going to Chapel Hill. Weird matchup in that one.
Bizarre.
6.5 point favorites are the Tar Heels. Florida State and BC. Slaughter. that is going to
be over very quickly.
Oh my God. BC. Whew, that's going to be rough. And then you got Louisville going to Indiana. We got Wake heading to ODU.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't go there.
People should learn from Virginia Tech's, where we've stepped on that grenade.
And Wake they're okay. They beat Vanderbilt, but like, we talk like ODU now that Grant Wilson has a couple games under his belt, a little bit of confidence. That's dangerous in the 7-5-7.
I agree.
Q's at Purdue. Q's has looked good, and Schrader has looked good. So it's funny. We were playing back-to-back Big Ten. Purdue are playing back-to-back ACC teams here, but it is in West Lafayette. So Q's has to go on the road in this one. Northwestern and Duke. The Nerds are going at it. GT and Ole Miss. I think GT could give them a little something. Haynes King has played well.
Yeah.
FIU, Clemson. Clemson should hopefully get more on track. Miami and Bethune, and this is the last 2. BT going to Rutgers. UVA going to Maryland. Half of the ACC out of conference road games.
That's not going to be good.
No, dude. Like
that we're going to get the ACC narrative back pretty quickly here.
Not that all the venues are. It's Louisville's going to Indiana. Like they should win that. But us going to Rutgers, like after what we just saw, we don't know how that's going to go. UVA is going to get probably crushed by Maryland. Maybe the freshman keeps them in it a little bit. Q's, hopefully they can take care of business against Purdue. Duke should beat Northwestern. That's a home game for Duke. But Pitt going to WVU after just how they looked. The game's almost a pick 'em. That could be a loss.
Yeah, we could end up with a very dreary Sunday morning for the ACC.
Yeah, week 3 for the ACC might not be pretty. I do think that after we saw what Jerkovich looked like against what is not a tremendous Cincinnati team, it makes me feel better about getting them at home. Like we might have a chance against Pitt.
Yeah, assuming that we can put some better defense on the field, then I think we can, and get in the backfield and bring him down when we're in the backfield.
This was the last comment from Billy right here, and then we'll sign off. His dad was drafted to the USFL, then to the New York Giants, who got ragdolled LN.
Last night.
Oh, yes. Last night. Okay. I was like, what is he talking about? Okay. Yeah. Dude, that Giants performance. Oh my God. That was, by the way, I was playing the Dallas defense in fantasy. Oh, they scored like 50 points because they didn't get scored on. They had multiple touchdowns, block kicks, sacks, whatever. But anyway,
random fantasy outcomes where your opponent is throwing a remote across the room because of your defense.
I was winning. Yeah, I was winning, and he had CeeDee Lamb and the defense. No one cares about my fantasy team. Anyway, thank you for joining College Football Monday. This is the 3rd episode, live thing we're doing here. Hop in every week. Going to be back at 9 a.m. next week. Recapping the Rutgers game, recapping all kinds of stuff. And I can't wait to get up to Rutgers. I'm going to the game. You know that. Talked about it endlessly. I tried to get you to come up for it. Not going to work out, but that's okay.
I know. Work's killer right now.
It's all good. But I will be hanging with the Suns boys, Silver Lot, for the Rutgers game. Come hang with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. It should be a long, fun day. 3:30 start. Gotta love the 3:30 start.
Get up early. 7 a.m.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining me, Rob. Thanks everyone for joining on the stream. Talk to you later.